What is good? I'm Matt Jumper. I'm a Framer designer and developer, and I've been building a ton of client websites in Framer recently. With that comes a lot of experience with the CMS, every client kind of bringing a new challenge or new configuration. So I've learned a lot, and I have a few tips and tricks that I want to share with you. And in this video, I'm actually going to walk you through a client project that I did for a real estate company. And I'm just going to walk you through all the CMS collections, how I set them up on the canvas, and how I made the collections even talk to each other through the canvas. So before we dive in, just a couple quick notes. One, all of this, no code as usual. But two, I am using actually some code. I lied, funny enough. Not any code in the CMS, but I am using a code inject override to use some Adobe fonts. So in my canvas, I'm using Jost font, but I'm actually using Futura on the live site. So if you're a designer, you might notice the difference between the two, why it might look a bit different, but just a heads up. Let's get into it. All right, so this site has a few complex CMS connections. I'm gonna ease into it. I'm gonna start with the easiest collection that we have, and that's testimonials. So we're only using it in 3 places. The first one is the homepage. We have a single testimonial, just a pull quote and a name here. That's it. We have it in the navigation underneath a dropdown. We have this testimonial here. And if I click into this, I get the testimonials page, which has just all of them here. And we have some pagination that allows you to load more, and it just keeps going. So let's hop into Framer and see how this stuff is set up. So if I open up the CMS collections here and go to testimonials, you'll see there's 72, so there's quite a bit. But the way this is set up, if I click edit fields, you'll see these are all the fields that I've created just for this testimonials collection. So starting at the top, we have 2 toggles here, navigation and home. Navigation is basically what we're going to use to show it just on the navigation. Homepage, same thing, only going to show it on the homepage. And then we have our text for name, pull quote, full quote. It's just plain text, nothing complicated. We have a slug here as well, which you'll notice that if you right click on it, you can't delete it. Framer requires you to have it on all CMS collections. However, this collection itself, we're just using for content. We're actually not making a unique page per testimonial. So theoretically, we don't need this slug, but like I said, we can't remove it, so we can just ignore it. So I can show you now, clicking into these testimonials. Everything's pretty straightforward. We have our toggles at the top. All of them are set to no, and this one here, you'll see it's set to yes, yes for navigation and home. This is the same one being used for both spots, but I decided to separate it out because that navigation testimonial has got to be pretty short versus the home testimonial. It can be any length that we want it. So it's good to separate those 2 things. So now I'll walk you through how the content in the CMS is actually connected to the designs on the canvas. So if I go to the testimonials page, this is just a standard page. It's not a CMS page. But if I open up the stacks here and dig into where I have the CMS collection, you'll see if I've inserted this CMS content. So to do this, you would go to insert collection list, and then you can basically do this to inject the content into any page. It doesn't need to be a CMS page. So this component here is basically the component that is being replicated however many times there are entries. So you'll see when I select it, I just have it selected once and actually can't select any other component because all it's doing is replicating this first component. So let's open this. If I hit edit, you'll see that there are a few different states for desktop, tablet, and phone. And this allows me to set the variant here. I can choose the responsive state, so I can change it per breakpoint. But in here, I'm basically setting this quote. I have text, and I'm just connecting this content. You can do set variable, and it's set to the pull quote. The name, it's set to the name, and the content here is set to the full quote. And you'll see that I actually have a prefix and a suffix here. So I did add transform, prefix, suffix. And what I did is actually add a quote before and after the text. So that way the client doesn't have to go through and add quotes to every single pull quote that they have. The visibility here is also set to the full quote being set. So if they only have the pull quote, this is actually just going to hide. And then we have another variable here where the color of this is set to a variable, but the default is orange. So the reason why I set this is because on the home page, this text here, I wanted it gray to not compete with the orange link. So I always set the color here to midnight 64. Going back in here, basically all of these variables are set to the CMS, and sometimes I'll feed these up another level so I can decide the customization on the canvas instead of inside the component. So it's pretty simple as far as the testimonials go. And I think the only other thing here is we have a pagination. So this is actually a new feature that Framer came out with today as I'm shooting this native pagination. So I'm limiting these testimonials to 6 at a time. And then we have a button that I've styled here. You'll see that the click action is tied to this new load more event. And this is just going to keep loading more in intervals of 6. On the homepage, I walked you through this, that this is just another instance, and I've kind of manually set this color here. The full quote, I removed it because I just want that pull quote. I don't want to muddy this section. But these variables are, again, connected. Same thing with the responsive states. And the border here is another variable that I set up because on the homepage, I actually didn't want a bottom border here, but on the testimonials page, I wanted the a line to separate all of these testimonials. And because it is a replicating it, you need to make sure that line is inside the component, and because you can't just like add it in between each instance because there technically is no separation of those components. So inside here, I have the frame, which I should probably call divider. But again, this visibility is set to toggle of border, yes or no. Then lastly, we have our navigation. So if I go to inside this navigation here, a few nested elements, we have our drop down. You'll see that there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of these cards here. And they're actually all following the same format, so same component. So if I click into any of these, it's going to pull the same component here. And what I have is a, on the component, I have a link that is being set in the instance above. We have an image here, a container for it, and inside here we have our image. Again, that is a variable that is shooting above. It's not connected to the CMS. I'm simply setting it on this level. You'll see here. But for the testimonials, I have inside this image, you'll see it's grayed out. It says testimonial. This is actually not visible because the default is set to being not visible. But you'll see there's a filter on this list, and the filter is navigation toggle. So this means that the toggle is set to yes for navigation. And if I go up here, I can toggle this on or off. So it's pretty straightforward how the testimonials are being used across each of the pages. And next we can get into the blog. So if I go to the blog page, there's actually nothing too crazy about this blog, to be honest. I know some of the blogs I've built have been pretty crazy with tags and categories and authors and stuff like that. But this one's pretty straightforward. The complexity of the CMS is really in the other sections, to be honest. But I'll walk you through this anyways. We have our index page of our blog, and we have, again, using those CMS lists, I have the latest 2 posts. So this is pulling from the collection blog, and then we have no filters or pagination, just a limit of 2. So it's just stopping at the first 2 posts. And then underneath here, we have another grid, and we actually have a couple more properties in here. We have start at 2, so we don't have a limit on it. We're starting it at 2, which is actually technically starting at 3. We're just ignoring the first 2. And then we have a pagination. So this is, again, increments of 9 because it's a grid. And then it gives us that same show more button. And if you're adding more categories or tags or anything like that, you could be adding more filters here, but we don't need this. And then inside of the collection list, it's the same idea where we have a single component. And inside here, I've connected the image here that's feeding up the date and the title. These are all just variables inside here that are being fed up. And then on this level, because it's inside the CMS list, I can make these connections to the CMS content itself. Same thing with the link. I can set it to go to the slug of that blog post. Inside the blog page, we can have a look. We have our image connected, our date connected, and this has a transform on it, basically changing that date variable. There's actually a date format. and we get to decide how it shows up. So you can choose between short, medium, long, full. So we like medium. And if you wanted to as well, you could be adding a transform and prefix, say like posted June 10, 2024, whatever. Then we have our title. We have our formatted text with all of these paragraphs and headings set. And then we have a you may also like section. And again, because we don't have a categories or tags, the recommendations here aren't very specific. It's basically just pulling in more blog posts. And all we're doing is adding a filter. And the title is basically saying the title doesn't equal the title of the current page. That way we don't see the post inside here and catch yourself in an infinite loop. So that should be straightforward as far as the blog setup. And I didn't actually show you inside here what these fields look like. We have our date, our image, title, the slug, which actually does matter at this point because we are making unique pages per blog post. Then we have our description and YouTube ID, and the content, which is the formatted text. So the description YouTube ID actually should probably talk to. The client does have some videos. So for example, anything with an episode here. So this has a YouTube ID set to it. So you'll see if I go into this page, if I just search, you'll see there is a video here. So this is the YouTube component, and all we're doing is doing two things. One, we're connecting the video YouTube ID to the CMS YouTube ID that we set up, which is literally just plain text, just feeding that number. And then we have a visibility condition. So this is just saying this YouTube component is only going to show up if the YouTube ID is set. It doesn't validate anything. It's just saying if there's anything in that field, we're going to show this component. All right, next we have team. So we have team in a couple different places as well, the navigation included. So from the about dropdown, you'll see we have an about page, which we have some team stuff on there. We also have a meet the team list here in the navigation itself, where we are pulling from the team CMS. If I go to the about page, we have just like broad about the company. But if I scroll down, we have a meet the team section. So actually it's pulling in each of the different members. And if I click on Ashley here, a few different things are going on. So one, we have her name and a looping video in the background and a button that says meet Ashley. So it actually opens up a modal and the video autoplays. If I scroll down, we have a bio, we have an image, of course, and then we have a contact box. So we have an email, we have a phone number, and underneath here we have Ashley's active listings. Underneath we have meet the team, and you'll notice that Ashley's not in this list. So it seems straightforward until you realize that, what if somebody doesn't have a video? What if they don't have any active listings? Stuff like that. So we have a fallback for the hero video. That's just an image. And we can also hide the listings if they don't have any. So that's the team page. And then we also have in the listings, if I were to click on one, we have the listing represented by, and we have the person's name, which links to their page, and we have their info. But this is tied specifically to this property. It's not just randomly populated, right? Jen's posting that one. If I click on this, it's Ashley. If I click on her name, it goes to her page. And then we have some more listings. So a bit of an ecosystem here that we've got to make sure that everything is tied together properly. And we'll get into more of these interconnected CMS collections with the other collections as well. So let's get into it. Let's open up Framer and see what we're working with. So if I go to the CMS, let's just look at the team page. This itself isn't going to be anything crazy. We have our first name, our last name, our SEO description, which I'll get to at the end. That's important. And then we have our slug. We have our bio, which is just formatted text. That's straightforward. We have our email and then an email link. So that link actually needs to be that mail to : and then their email. Same thing with the phone and then setting that link. And then we have awards, which are images. And then we have a YouTube ID, which is set for the video that autoplays when you click on it. And then the looping video, which we're actually uploading ourselves. Underneath, we have an option to show listings. So we have all, which is basically any listing that they've had, whether it's active or if it's previously been sold, or just active listings or don't show any. And the awards, I think they actually removed them recently. They did have them populated. But let's just take a look at this page, see how this is set up. So first thing is the name. You'll see that we have this connected to the CMS, but there's actually a transform on it. So if I click on this, you'll see a couple things. One, the first name and the last name are actually broken out. When I went through the CMS, those are two different fields. And that's actually intentional because as a brand, it's important to, especially in real estate, important to, be very approachable and refer to people maybe just by their first name instead of so formal and like a first name, last name in every instance that you mention somebody's name. So we separated it out and then we combined it by adding a suffix of their last name, but then also in between the last name and the first name added a suffix of just a space. So that just brings it all together. Underneath here, we have a button, and this button also had a title here, and that's the name. So in this button, we added a prefix of meet with a space after. On this button, you'll notice we don't have a link. We're actually adding an overlay, and this overlay has the title here, which again is that combination prefix, suffix, and another prefix of meet for the name. And then inside here, we have our YouTube ID for the YouTube player. If I go back to this button, let's close this out. This is also visible only if the YouTube ID is set. So that way, if it's no video, we're not going to get a play button. Behind this name, we have two stacks here. We have a video, we have a photo. So the video here, again, the visibility is set to, if that looping video that we uploaded is set, it's going to show. If not, it's going to hide. And this photo, if the looping video isn't set, it's going to show up. And if it is, it'll hide. Inside the video, we have our file, and this is again connected to that variable. And we did set the opacity to 0.75 just to make sure that that text is legible. And then underneath, we have an image, straightforward, formatted text, straightforward. And underneath here, we have our get in touch text. So this content is pulling in the first name, and we're just adding, again, that prefix of get in touch with space. And then we have our email and phone number. So the visibility here is set to the email being set. Same thing with the phone. And then the content is pulling that in, again, from that same variable. And the link is connected to that link. And same thing for the phone. So if I open the carousel, you'll see there's two options here. There's listings all and listings active. So the listings active has the collection list for listings. The filter is has presented by and her first name. So this is only pulling in Ashley's listings. And there's also a filter that says available. And again, I'll get to this collection next. The visibility on this is set to, if the listings option that I showed you in the CMS equals show active listings, it's going to show this CMS list. If we have this other listings all, and the visibility is the opposite. So if listings equals all, it'll show this one. And then this whole carousel here, up here, featured listings as a whole, this is only going to be visible if the listings doesn't equal none. So if it equals all or active, then this whole thing will show up. Otherwise, the whole thing will hide because we don't want the title to say, we don't want the title to exist at all. We want it to be hidden. And the title itself has that same filter as the listings all, listings active. So Ashley's active listings, visible only if listings equals active, only visible if listings equals all. And that's the text there is Ashley's featured listings versus active listings. We have meet the team underneath here, and I've set some variables here to feed up, and you'll see that it says team member is first name. What we're doing here is inside here, we're actually setting this. We have this collection, and the filter is the first name doesn't equal, and then I have team member. So that's why it's filtering out Ashley at this level, because we're the filters to exclude this variable. All right, so the last two collections we have are the listings and the neighborhoods, which are kind of connected in a pretty close way. So we have our active listings on this page, and we have our featured listing here, which obviously has a different layout. It's just one at the top. And we have our featured badge here, just listed badge. Underneath here, we have a grid. And again, some of these are just listed, some not. We have info, the address, the neighborhood, the bed and the bath, the price. If I toggle over to portfolio, we'll see listings that are only that have already sold, already leased, and they're also paginated. If I go to this listing here, we have our image and actually have the option to look at all the images, and this is all being pulled from the CMS. And then we have all these stats about the property with their unique icons. And then we have formatted text and more details here. You'll notice on the right here, we have a bunch of info, again, being pulled from the CMS, but we have the team member and then a sold button here and a virtual tour button. So the sold button obviously needs to be dynamic to make sure that that's clear versus like a book a showing button. We have our neighborhood, which is pulling in the name, and then we have a map and then an actual guide to the neighborhood, because this is one of the neighborhoods that the client has actually set up a guide in the CMS for. And then we have you may also like, and then on the neighborhoods page, just kind of covering this all at once from the site itself, we have just a grid of all the neighborhood guides that the client has made. So if I click into one, it's pretty straightforward, just a bunch of formatted text, a title and an image, and a map. And then we have listings in this neighborhood. And lastly, underneath this, we have more Toronto neighborhoods. So we're just doing the same thing where we want to just make sure that we're not including the one that we're currently on. So as far as like what this looks like on the site, that's it. But there are a lot of intricacies that are set up in the pages themselves. We'll start on the neighborhoods page. This is going to be the most straightforward. We have our index page, and this is the same thing where we just have our CMS list here, and we have our collection being the neighborhoods, and we actually don't have any filters on it because we're just showing all 12 of them without any pagination, without any filters. And clicking into it, we're going to get some more details. So we have our background image. I can attach that image. I'm not going to walk you through like every little small thing here. The only bigger thing here is that the visibilities are set if the text is set or not. So if they're missing a section of "Why live here," the whole thing is just not going to show up, as well as the divider associated with that underneath that section. Otherwise, if you forget that, you'll just end up with like a stack of dividers. We have our map underneath here, which is an embed of HTML, and that HTML is set to plain text. So it's easy for the client just to grab the embed code and paste it in here. And then the listings underneath here, you'll see that the featured listings has a visibility toggle to show listings. And then underneath here, we have our listings title with a transform. Neighborhood is set to the variable, and we have listings in as a prefix. And then in the listings CMS list here, we have filter being the neighborhood, and that neighborhood is set to match this neighborhood. And then here, same thing where we're feeding the current to make sure it's not the neighborhood, but the links are set to the slugs. So I'll look in the CMS itself so you can see all those different elements. Again, the fields here show listings, and that's just to hide or show that section because there's no dynamic way to know if there are actually listings in that neighborhood. So this is kind of a manual process, just knowing the constraints and just building, an experience around that. Image, neighborhood, it's all straightforward, as well as the summary and all of the text. Then the Google Map embed, again, is just plain text and easy enough to just drop in that code. So the neighborhood itself, again, not too crazy, but it's what happens with the listings. So we'll go into the listings page, and we have a component that is toggling between basically the active and the portfolio. And then we have our featured component, which in here I've made a desktop and a phone state. And all of these elements, we're just feeding up these variables and deciding what to do with them on this level. And then just connecting all of these things because we're inside this CMS list again. And then basically this toggle, we're going between these two states. And I guess I can make this a white background so you can see it as well. But clicking on this brings you here and vice versa. And the same thing as the blog where we have our featured list and then our grid list. And the grid list has that filter of under active listings, it's available and it's not featured, making sure that we're not doubled up here. And this featured one is available and featured on listings page. On the right, we have our portfolio. So it's kind of the opposite where we have filters where it's just not available. And we have some pagination where it just limits it to intervals of 6. Inside the page, we have a bunch of stuff. Again, images connected. This view all images button is the visibility is set only if image 2 is set, because if it's one image, we don't need to see a gallery, but if it's 2, we would need to. So that's what's deciding the visibility. And then in this overlay, we have a bunch of stacks here. But in this image stack, we're basically just putting in images and connecting the variables here, image 3, image 4, 5, 6, and so on up to 20. And the visibility is basically if that image 6 is set, then image 6 is going to show. So I'll just close that overlay. And then in here, it's the same kind of thing where we are setting this content to be bedrooms here. And this is a number. So there's quite a few things that you can do with it. But basically just showing the number and then adding a suffix of space and bedrooms. And then same thing for every other element here. And then also setting the visibility based off of if that text is set or not. That's a lot of what this is, just conditions of visibility of things being set or not. And then on the right, we have just listed, again, visibility toggle. And then we have our person, team member here. And this filter is being set to the first name of the presented by in this field. So this is where things get creative, but also like it gets a bit risky because there's room for error. So this CMS field is basically showing a text box to say present by first name. And this text actually has to match somebody in the team page that has first name Ashley and nothing else. You could do contains, but then you'd get into a kind of messy situation where if like somebody's name is like Elizabeth and then somebody else's name is Eliza, you don't want like contains Eliza because you'd get both those names. So you want it to be equals, but that just leaves little room for error. But by doing this, what you're doing is, again, the filter it's pulling in teams and the filter is being populated by this text field. So that's a kind of a creative way to connect these two without actually connecting them in CMS, but connecting it in the canvas. And then we do this again with the neighborhood. So if I scroll down here, this one is Fort York. So we actually don't have a neighborhood guide for this. We don't have that in the CMS, but we have a couple things going on here. So the neighborhood guide, the neighborhood Fort York. This is a similar thing where the visibility is if the neighborhood is set, we'll show it. And if not, we'll do it, just show the neighborhood without any text beside it. So now's a good time to walk you through the actual listings CMS fields. So we have our address, which is just text, which is also creating the slug. And then the two main things here are neighborhood simple and neighborhood CMS. So neighborhood simple, I've actually added some help text here. It says populate with any neighborhood that's not connected anywhere. So if you look at the text here, it's saying neighborhood Fort York. This isn't connected anywhere. Again, because that's not part of the CMS. If I look on this grid here, we have the neighborhood listed here. CO1 Niagara, Toronto, CO1 East York, waterfront communities. All of these are just neighborhoods. That's helpful information, but it's not, we don't have a neighborhood guide for it. So we've split it up where you can put in the neighborhood simple and the neighborhood CMS. And I put a note, only populate with a neighborhood that matches an exact CMS entry. It's the same thing where this is going to be used as a filter and there's no room for error here. So even if you add an extra space or a dash or whatever that is, it could mess things up. So looking at an example of a listing where that actually is connected, go to King Street West, neighborhood King Street West, and then we have our guide here. So I'll walk you through these again a bit slower. So we have our neighborhood guide here, this card. The collection is neighborhoods. The filter is just the neighborhood. It's connected to the neighborhood CMS. Straightforward. And then the card itself is just making those same connections, again, connected to the neighborhood inside of the neighborhood CMS, not the listings CMS. And then going back to the title, we have our neighborhood King West. This visibility is only set if the neighborhood CMS is set. And then because it's pulling in from the neighborhood. And if it's not set, this stack shows up. And then we have our conditions again, if the neighborhood simple is set or if no neighborhood at all. So basically it's the same thing where like, this is the primary one. If this isn't set, then we choose between these two because one of these is going to be set. So nesting that is just a way to like add a layer of visibility conditions. Underneath here, we have our you may also like. So this is just generic, as I mentioned before. And this carousel here, or just the 4 listings. The filter is that it's available. The address doesn't equal the address that we're on, and also the sale type matches. So that's the only kind of relevancy here that we're using, where the sale type is the same. So in the CMS, because I haven't walked you through this part yet, the sale type is for lease or for sale. So if you're looking for something for lease, I don't want to recommend you a house for sale. So going back to the CMS, let's see what else we have here. So we have our toggle if it's available. We have our badge for just listed. And then we have our featured on listings page and featured on homepage. So this is actually, if you go to the listings page, and I click into this component here, this is where the filter is of featured on listings page. And then on the homepage, we also have a featured listings here. And this is, this carousel here is a lot of nesting here, but basically we have a listings level here, and we have a toggle of featured on homepage. And I just have the number beside it to let you know that you should have 6 numbers or 6 posts that actually have that feature. And then again, the address doesn't equal the current address. Going back to the listings CMS, we have our description snippet, which is being used on the featured post. And then presented by, we covered that. We have price, taxes, maintenance, all these standard things. Bedrooms and bathrooms, you can actually use these, the plus minus, which is nice. And then we have our formatted text for a bunch of these different properties. We have our virtual tour link. And again, that's just another button that is the visibility set if this is populated or not. Google Map Embed, same thing. And then a disclaimer here that is by default just going to show up, but if not, we can you can override that. And then we have our featured image and then all the rest of the images up to 20. So this is definitely a shortcoming of the current CMS. I'm very hopeful that Framer comes out with a batch, like drag and drop 20 images and not have to manually click on each of these and click on this and paste it or choose the image. It's very tedious, I admit. If you're importing from a CSV, this is a lot easier, just with that link for the image field. But if you are just adding these one by one, it can get tedious. Again, hopefully not for long. All right, and then lastly, I'm just going to show you how to make sure that all of the CMS content that you're using is actually properly connected so that the page title and descriptions and images are connected to the CMS and dynamically just populating all of this content to make your life so easy. If we go to the settings, we see page settings. We have our individual pages that you can manually just type in your title and your description, upload your own share image, stuff like that. If you go to a CMS page, for neighborhoods, for example, you'll see that here I'm using these squiggly brackets. Basically, you can use these to dynamically populate the title and description from the fields that you set up. So under here, you actually can see an example of all the variables you have access to. So you have neighborhood, slug, summary, and Google Map embed, because these are just plain text fields that you've populated. So the title is going to be the neighborhood, and then the page description is the summary. So the preview of this is Trinity Bellwoods, and then I have the hard line ASP, and then the description that the client put. So this makes sense. The image too, it lists out the variables. We have image, and it's connected to that. If I wanted to, I can manually input one for all of them, but this definitely makes a lot more sense to use that image. You could also set up a custom image field where you could have the image where it's being used for the page, where it's just this city image, and then you could also upload a new one where you maybe put text on top that has the name of the neighborhood and set that just to be the share image. It could be a nice touch. For the listings, same thing, where we have our address is the title, and then for the description, we have our description snippet. Under the team, we have our first name space last name, and then we have our SEO description, which is that field that we made specifically just for SEO. We don't need that anywhere else on the site. And then image, we have the same thing connected to the that main image. Again, this one is the vertical images, so if you wanted to optimize this to be the proper aspect ratio, you could do that. And then all the other collections that we had don't have their own pages, so we don't have to worry about them. Just this stuff dynamically set, so everything is looking good. All right, so that's my walkthrough of my client site with a pretty advanced CMS setup. And if you want to learn more about how to actually make an advanced CMS collection, I know I walked you through one that's already set up. Shameless plug, in the Framer Masterclass with Flux Academy, I do get into making a blog with categories and tags and authors that are all connected with one each other dynamically from scratch. So if you're interested, definitely check that out in the description below. But otherwise, just keep watching more Flux videos. We're going to have so much more Framer stuff for you. So make sure you give us a follow, and you can follow me personally on YouTube and on X, both just Matt Jumper. And if you have any Framer requests or any video requests, drop them in the notes below. Hope to see you guys soon.